Ladies and gentlemen, we've been delaying the meeting a bit. We haven't heard from our chairwoman, Mrs. Treesice, and I tried to reach her. We've tried to reach her, but no answer, so we're going to proceed. And if she comes in, she'll be able to participate right away. This is a hearing of the Zoning Board of Appeals, scheduled for October 20th. We have two applications on the agenda. The first application has been withdrawn, so if there's anyone here for the Michael McCarran of 133 Glades Road application for a special permit, that has been withdrawn at the request of the applicant. Right. Do we need to vote to approve the withdrawal without prejudice? A motion to approve the withdrawal?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It's unanimous. Second application. Ann, are you anxious to read, or do you want me to just continue reading? I will. Second application is continued from our September 15th meeting of 2016 of Alfred Boyajian of 94 Marion Road, Scituate, Mass., requesting a special permit finding pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, or Section 810.2A of the Situate zoning bylaw, to construct an addition which will increase the gross floor area of a dwelling by 102% on a pre-existing non-conforming lot at 94 Marion Road, Scituate, Mass., Assessor's Map 40, Block 11, Parcel 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just a reminder, too, we did close the meeting to there, so we had the vote to do any additional information we need. So we will not be hearing from the public on this application tonight. We've already done that at the last meeting.
Right. Okay. We did ask that some additional information be presented by the applicant for our deliberation. And
If in conclusion of the last hearing, we'd asked for a continuance. The plan was to come back with some language that we were going to prepare that would try to reach a compromise between the request that the plans for the house have a condition on them that those would have to be the exact plans, the exact shape of the house, windows, roof lines, et cetera, et cetera. We have not provided that information. The reason we agreed to ask for the continuance was we were under the belief that the board had to have a unanimous vote for a finding. This is not a special permit. It's clearly a finding in the section 810.2. And subsequent to the continuance of that meeting, I was at the following hearing, and it was decided that we agreed upon that the finding only needed 2 votes. We have not prepared that language because we don't feel it's necessary. We wouldn't agree to it. We think that's going beyond the jurisdiction of the board to impose such restrictions and limitations on a project of this nature. I also indicated during the meeting, I'd asked a question, the board agreed that for a finding, we did not have to have architectural plans, and they agreed. The following hearing was a similar case with no architectural plans, and that was approved with the finding. The applicant in this case did file the architectural plan, so everyone in the neighborhood during the building will be able to see exactly what he's going to build. There are several reasons for that. So, having said all this, what I ask is that the board close the hearing and vote on the project.
Are we open for discussion of that?
sure.
So I was intrigued by Mr. DeLisi's comments the last time on a different application, but you picked up on the question about the finding, whether this is not a special permit situation or a finding. And so I thought it was probably also a question that's applicable here as well. Because, at least since I've been on the board, we've treated most of these types of applications as being special permit applications. And I appreciate the case Jeff cited and the distinction between a permit granting authority and a special permit granting authority, which the statute contemplates. So, and Paul, I realize you're not an attorney, but if you look at 952B2, well, 952, yeah, 2B2, the 950 sets forth the powers of the Board of Appeals. B is the authority to grant special permits. 2 says, starting with B, to hear and decide in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Laws 40A, Section 9, applications for special permits, including 2, permits for lots with frontage less than that provided in Section 610-2B, which this application has that deficiency in lot frontage. So the way I read this portion of the bylaw, it does require a special permit. It's interesting that the only thing that I've been able to pick out looking over the bylaws is frontage. I'm not sure why frontage is treated differently than side setbacks or front setbacks or anything like that, but it seems to be.
I'm not sure I read that particular section that way.
Okay.
I think that in certain situations, a special permit for lots with less than the required frontage is required. Specifically, I think a 50-foot frontage lot would require a special permit. I don't read that section to state that any lot, specifically because this is pre-existing non-conforming, I think it's pretty well settled that a special permit is not required. There are situations in the bylaw where one can have less than the required frontage, and in order to do that, they would need a special permit, and I think that's what B2 is contemplating and addressing there.
Yep, now that I look at it, I think you're right.
And in the case of those...
2B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's leaving the door open for. I think the distinction with findings is
I should have read on.
pre-existing non-conforming, and then obviously Gale played a big role.
Yeah, I would concur. I think that the
Okay.
question here is more that we do allow for the creation of a lot of less than 100-foot frontage, or less than appropriate frontage, as opposed to the existence of a lot. with
And
less
that
than
very
frontage.
clearly is a special permit
Right,
situation.
okay. Gotcha.
But better...
Yeah, no,
Better to be
that's
clear.
why we're here.
Belt and suspenders, we're not trying to do anything, less than carefully.
That also brings to a couple of the other correspondence we have received since the last meeting. One being from the DPW regarding their site visit to there, and the determination that the 2 drains in question did not drain into the town system and around the property and stay on the property. So just there was, again, some question about that last meeting, so to get that answered.
There's no evidence that the drainage system was ever part of the roadway drainage system,
Correct.
simply a private system for drainage on property.
The other part, since we're going over the bylaw, that I think there was some discussion about is what discretion the board might have beyond dimensions to condition an approval, and 950.4 does give the board the power to impose conditions, safeguard and limitations reasonably appropriate to protect the neighborhood and otherwise to serve the purposes of the bylaw, and then it lists some of the things that can be done. So I think on that, Sarah's correct, that there is some authority for the board to impose some types of conditions. Now, what those conditions might be
Right. As a means
is I think,
to
probably the question, and my memory is that the only person really that wanted to impose conditions, specific conditions based on the architectural drawings was Sarah, so we may have a shorter discussion.
Yeah.
Well, I think the applicant has presented some architectural drawings, proposal of the work they're looking to do. The work is, a full set, right. The work is, the application is to construct an addition. This is not a raise and reconstruct. So they're working within some constricts of the foundation, the capacity of the foundation to carry the load, et cetera. I think my concern at the time, last meeting, was if we hold them to build exactly as presented, and then they went in and found that the foundation needed reconstructing, or that, modifying it to make it smaller would be a better option for them. They wouldn't have that option if we were too restrictive.
Yeah, we might tend to be working in the area of limiting the square footage.
Right.
And maybe putting a number on that, to the, that way, if there is some movement, the plans, design change, or whatever, we can.
And effectively, we've done that by limiting it to 102%.
Right.
That's the applicant's request.
Which goes directly to the intensification that we'd be concerned with, and so that seems exactly within the spirit of the bylaw and our purpose.
Right, they're not asking to or expecting to create further nonconformities, reducing front yard setbacks or anything like that. They can't change the lot dimensions.
No, or
And still retain pre-existing condition privilege.
Just because it was such a topic at the last hearing for this application, can we touch upon height again? Where did we leave off at the last meeting? I'm trying to refresh my own memory.
I think your motion had basically said that we're going to hold you to the elevations that are set forth on the plan.
Right.
And then once you have those elevations, then it's up to the building department to make sure that it complies with the height requirements of the bylaw. Which
Right.
is what I think we've done in most other cases as well. So
Great.
I was comfortable with that.
Yeah, and I think also another thought on that too was the existing ground elevation, Paul, has that changed any since the plan was done?
No.
No, so that might,
Just to point out, on the architectural plans, when I was putting the application together, I looked at the architectural plans, and I called the architect, and I said to her, be very specific, on sheet A21, I said to her, show the height of the building, and the living grade around the house, the peak of the roof, it's 33 feet, 5 3/4 inches. Okay, and I did that for a reason.
But again, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but when we talk about height of a building, we're talking about the midpoint between the ridge and the gutter.
Yeah, there's two ways to measure it. There's a maximum for ridge of 40. There's a maximum dimension between gutter and ridge of 35.
So in both cases, this is below,
Yes, it is.
so. But at the same time, it's measured from average grade, and the grades have been given in the field drawing, or the stamped drawing.
well, that was my question, should we maintain, as part of our decision, should the same grade be maintained?
Well, they're saying that those are the grades, the finished grades. So they can't go and change them. I think
That was
that's
a concern, I think
the
that was
reference.
concerned by some people too.
Yeah,
That might
I think
be
that-
a way to, the final as-built will have the grades on it.
Yeah, I think especially given, was that not part of the decision that we were discussing?
Well, and I think we were referencing the drawing, which is inclusive, but we can even clarify it by saying, referencing the drawing, and
Grade points to remain.
and specifically to be concerned that grade points remain as projected, which would restrict them from coming in and putting in a retaining wall and raising the average grade in any way.
If I can ask one question
Please.
of Mr. Maravito. Do the grades on the drawings that we have seen, Paul, represent existing grades now on the site? Roughly, I'm talking within 6 inches, that's it.
We're gonna be, the only filling on this lot's gonna be in the front yard where we fill the driveway in. The rest of the yard is stay the same. It's a fairly flat lot. It only varies by a few tenths from the front to the back on the left side, and the right side varies about a foot.
Right.
And one more small point, what was the date of that survey? When were those grades taken?
I don't know the exact date of that.
It's-
If I can,
The plan is dated July 29.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes the survey's done.
if I can ask a specific question, Paul, the concern was that the existing driveway has been filled. There's been additional material put into the existing driveway. That, on a field visit, appears to be the case. But if I look at the elevations here, the elevation of the catch basin is 13.9. The elevation of the driveway, very close to that, is 14.9. Unless there's a pretty big hole there, you're already showing the elevations post-fill. I mean, you go from 16.6 at the northeast corner of the open deck, 16.5 at the northwest corner, and 14.9 in the middle. There's, you're only talking there a 1.5 foot difference. Do you think that these grades are showing at least a partial filling of the driveway
You mean in the current condition,
in these drawings?
in these drawings here?
Or do you think the filling of the driveway took place after the fact?
The filling may have taken place after this grade, because the streets are at 15.5 and 15.8. The basin was at 14 on this drawing.
There's another catch basin closer to the garage door.
That's 14.6.
Well,
No,
the one near the garage
closer
door is
to the
13.9. But there's a measurement of 14.9 right next to it.
Yeah. It appears that you lose a foot of elevation in the,
In a short distance.
yeah,
At
in
about 5
the
feet.
5
What
feet.
we said, what we said in one of the notes here was that,
You do specify that it will be filled.
yes, in note 10.
Right.
We give you the elevations. The catch basin is to be raised to the proposed.
Looks like it goes down pretty quick.
16.6.
If you look at the photos,
That's what I'm saying. I want him to say that it hasn't, that's before. This is
Yeah.
before.
there is a little,
Right,
So he's covered it both ways.
right.
I guess,
Exactly the-
Paul, the point is,
Oh, yeah.
it does.
I'm
So that's
suggesting that
probably
It does
the
drop.
grades taken on this drawing and cited on this drawing in the driveway area are pre-fill. There has been some fill added to the driveway area, at least that appears to be the case
Looks like it drops off.
from a layman's evaluation.
If there was some put in after we did the grades, I'm not aware.
Okay, but you are also saying in note 10 that that's the intention, that's part of the plan. So it's,
Right.
we're still safe to say that the average elevation of the lot is not changing, just the driveway's being
Right.
evened off. If you brought the elevation of the driveway to 16.6, you're not going to change the average elevation of the lot at all.
I don't think necessarily our motivation was to prevent further filling of the lot. It was to prevent further filling of the lot resulting in a greater allowable height.
Correct.
yes.
So that, I think we want the height calculation based on these numbers. To the extent they fill the lot further, I think we discussed it last meeting.
Right, that's
Well,
fine.
That's
And
partially
again,
up to
we're
them.
just leaving the only fill portion to be the driveway to bring up the elevation. We can, list that reference note 10 in the drawings too, to account for that.
I mean, maybe the simplest way to do it would be to allow the elevation of 33, 5 3/4 from the average elevation shown on this plan.
Right.
And then stop it there.
Right. And this plan, that reference would also indicate that note 10, the modification is proposed,
Yeah.
so it's inclusive.
Should we,
Any other discussion?
Andy, is there any chance you have the decision that, or the motion that we spoke out at the last meeting available? I think we might have proposed one.
Yes.
Sure.
yes. Not here, but I can just print something.
If it's easy.
I think so.
Okay,
All right, if it's not, just come back and we'll start from scratch. Thanks.
That
While
would,
we're waiting, one more question. Paul, I think I heard you say that the catch basin rims are going to be raised to coincide with the new elevation of the driveway area. So those catch basins are going to continue to operate as drainage structures under the new final conditions. And since DPW doesn't know where they're tied in, I would not expect you to know either. But do they in fact drain someplace into dry wells or into some piping system that
Maybe first
we don't know about?
I don't know if they're cleaned on a regular basis, or as far as I know, they're just little leaching pits.
Okay.
Now, Paul, with it, also just to kind of follow up on Bob's question too, will the driveway pitch into the street or will it pitch into the catch basins?
It's gonna pitch to the street. What we're gonna do is to pick it up to the front level of the lawn on each side, 16.6, and slope that out to the street. And that distance is gonna drop. So the grade on each side of the house is gonna be 16.6 on the left and 16.5 on the right. And
So you gotta connect those dots.
we're gonna connect the
That-
dots and slope out to the edge of the pavement, it's 15.8, so on one side you're gonna drop only 8 inches from the house to the pavement in the street, which is pretty flat. And on the other side, you go from 16.6 to 15.5, that's like 1.1 feet and about 33 feet, that's a flat slope as well.
Okay, so the catch basin is gonna be eliminated then, or just raised and still be in the driveway?
You could still leave them there if you wanted to. And they aren't gonna pick much up unless you put some roof leaders in it or something, but those are dry wells.
Okay.
You could use them.
I guess it's fair to say that any construction on the lot that goes on should not increase the flow of water onto any neighboring property or the public way.
I don't. Really?
Well, under the stormwater bylaw.
I mean, won't it?
An increase of 25% or more, you have to contain the volume on site.
Right.
We did the calculations, it's only a 10% increase.
Okay.
Of overall non-pervious material, roof and everything?
The increase is coming from, the addition on the back of the house and to the side,
Okay.
with a bigger roof area.
I don't think, does the town regulate
Onto the street.
slope towards to the street? I think we
Yes,
regulate
it can't, yeah.
impervious area, but not the
Right.
pitch of impervious area.
That's right.
Thank you. I'm going to read what we had from last meeting, and then we can tweak it how we see fit. Motion that the board find the proposed improvements per the plan submitted by Ross Engineering and dated 7/29/2016 do not create new nonconformities and do not propose an extension of existing nonconformities. Further, that the board conditions its findings on proposed improvements on the site being built in a manner not to exceed the proposed side, front, and rear setbacks, height, side, front, and rear setbacks, and height with respect to the existing grade as noted on the written application and shown on the plan. Further, to the extent that there is any intensification of the lot area nonconformity, that the board find that it is not substantially more detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood.
So two things I think we need to add. One, I think we need to find, even though it's obvious and we discussed it, that the lot is non-conforming as to lot area, frontage, and right sideline, the existing lot, because that's just a Gale thing. They want you to set forth what it is that's non-conforming.
Oh, okay.
And then the second thing is I think we got a little bit more specific about our discussion on height today, and so we're going to say that the height shall not exceed 33, 5 3/4 feet from the average elevations shown on the plan.
The height to the peak,
Height to the peak.
to the ridge. That clarifies the question of what measurement
Where
we're
the
talking
point's coming from?
Yeah,
What was the peak height?
33, 5 3/4?
Correct.
you should probably also say that it's from the average grade at the foundation.
All right, and the 33, if that's the peak, that's not the midpoint?
Correct.
According to the design, yes.
Okay. So I think the revised motion would read that the board find that the proposed improvements per plan submitted by Ross Engineering and dated 7/29/2016 do not create any new we should start. The board find that the lot is non-conforming as to side yard, the right side yard setback, lot area, and lot frontage. And that the proposed improvements per plan submitted by Ross Engineering, 7/29/2016, do not create new nonconformities and do not propose an extension of existing nonconformities. Also, that the board condition its finding of the proposed improvements on site that they be built in a manner not to exceed the proposed side, front, and rear setbacks, and that the height of the building not exceed 33 feet, 5 3/4 inches as measured from the average grade of the surrounding area of the home as shown on the plan.
Average grade at the foundation.
At the foundation
Foundation.
as shown on the plan.
Do we want to touch in any way the square footage, the 200% increase also,
I think that's
to include that?
not typically tied in with the proposed improvements as shown on the plan.
All right.
Do we, I mean, do we,
No, I just want to,
yeah,
all right. and
It
then-
does say, note 8 says the existing square, gross floor area, the proposed floor area, and that it's 102% increase, so it's,
Will not exceed that.
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
defined.
and we limited it to side, front, and
And the
height,
oth-
so there.
The other thing, the final as-built, the elevations, how should we address that? The existing elevations not to plus or minus a couple inches, or how close do you want?
That's what they are.
Construction,
It's what they are, I mean.
I think they're allowed to mess with the elevations, they just can't build any higher because they mess with the elevations, right?
right.
Right, after the fact, if they build 35 or 33 and 3/4 inch, whatever it was.
33, 5
And then
3/4.
later, they put a garden retaining wall at the foundation to put
in
you know,
mulch
plants in there.
beds
That would
and
not
whatnot,
be, that would not change.
And the 1 foot that we're talking about a fill in the driveway didn't affect the average overall height anyway.
At the foundation, no, because all of the points of the foundation are already set.
Accounted
Yeah,
for.
we're measuring before.
All you're doing is tying across in the driveway. Leveling that grade.
Just to finish that motion, that the board find that to the extent there's any intensification of the lot area nonconformity, that such intensification is not substantially more detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood.
Second.
Second. Discussion.
Go ahead.
Discussion, if there is.
Moved, seconded.
Discussion, if there is anything else to add to that?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. We were all present at the hearing, the previous hearing, so we're all qualified to vote. Pick a name. Do you want to vote, Frank?
Who wants to write it?
Well, let's write it.
Look at that. All right.
Wow, a volunteer.
To come up.
I'll send
I think you
it.
had double duty last time.
I did, thank you.
I was going to volunteer.
What do you mean? He's gonna write this decision. I'm gonna type out the decision right now, so you don't have to read the motion, so that you don't have to read my chicken scratch here. And I'll email it to both of you.
Oh, thank you. And then-
Keeping that?
No, I just so these guys could talk.
It's actually 2 meetings ago.
Oh,
Yeah, they're already in.
you weren't on the hook.
No, I don't think anybody was. Yeah.
I think we're all up to date, aren't we?
Yeah, last meeting, I think the only decision, or the 2 decisions came from the applicants. And the meeting before, I think
And we've
we're
seen
up
them.
to date.
John has to include, we wanted to know.
Oh, what address was that? I must have skipped over that email. I think we got a few that day.
We're all set.
Turner Road? Okay.
Question?
Sure.
James on Panama Road. I'm really curious because of the precedent that has been set. How did this application get characterized as a special permit in the first place?
It's not. It was the application is a finding. Typically, when an applicant comes before us, it will be presented as a special permit / finding, leaving that open so that we can discuss it in both formats if we feel it needs to slide into one or the other. We typically look at it in the least restrictive way. This is a finding. So,
Well, I understand it is now, but it wasn't at the last meeting, and there was significant discussion about special permit conditions, and that took an extensive amount of time and some angst, as I understand it, offline.
I don't think we ever viewed it as requiring a special permit. Whether we could condition our findings was part of the discussion we were having. The discussion was, that the chairman had some concerns about whether we could restrict design, et cetera. We don't have an architectural design bylaw, and there was some debate about that, discussion amongst the board. But it's always, I believe, I don't think we ever had identified it as requiring a special permit.
No, there was-
Applications before us are often applied for both.
Yeah, there were, at the last meeting, there was discussion as to whether a finding required a unanimous vote like a special permit does, and there was discussion as to whether or not we could condition our findings like we do a special permit. So maybe that's where some of the confusion was. But because this property was previously non-conforming, they have to come back to the board to modify the structure so that we find that they're not taking advantage of that pre-existing non-conforming nature.
So the special permit condition was not imposed on this application to the exclusion of others?
So the special permit did not apply here, but we did impose conditions on our finding. We found that this construction would be allowable only if, what we just recited, basically, we found that this proposed construction on this plan should be allowable under the bylaw, but that an expansion of this proposed construction likely wouldn't, or at least wouldn't be under this decision that we voted on here tonight.
Just to be clear, I
course.
wrote this part of the bylaw when I was planning board chair many years ago.
Sure.
And I'm just concerned that the application be applied in a fair sense. It's either a finding or a special permit. It really can't be both.
And I don't believe any of us think it is, and I can assure you, we
Well,
share
there
your
may-
concern.
The confusion
We
might
may
lie.
have findings
There
leading
may be-
to
yeah,
a
I mean,
special permit.
The Gale decision requires us to make certain findings.
And
I
then
think
go
that's,
to
Yeah,
a special permit.
yeah.
Understood, but the special permit condition requires a different voting structure.
It does.
Right.
A different advertising protocol, public hearing, and so forth. So I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page.
right.
But I don't think it requires a special advertising protocol. Part of the reason that often our applications are published as both special permit / finding is so that we don't have to come back, and if the board finds that we're moving toward a special permit that the applicant wasn't aware of, that we have to go back and repost and re-advertise. So it's advertised as a special permit / finding, leaving the board a broader spectrum to consider
When
it.
do you make that determination, which road you're going to go down?
When we hear the information before us and whether or not it requires a special permit. I mean, as we were today, Frank brought up the question of 950 and questioned whether this, because of the frontage, required a special permit, and then we looked at it and said, well, no, because that happens in our deliberations in public, as opposed to, I mean, certainly the code enforcement officer, building inspector will counsel with applicants as to how to best structure an application, what they need to do, but a lot of it's left open at the board, and we don't want to have to waste the town's time, our time, the public's time, to have to repost and come back again. So that's why we will often have a posting that is broader than the four corners that we anticipate having to be within, so that we don't have to go and repost.
And the applicant is well advised of the road you're taking.
I think so. I think the applicant has tremendous resources here at the town to, in the department,
Okay. All right.
to inquire as to where they
Thank you.
go.
I watched last week, and I was very concerned as I was watching, and was throwing things at the television.
That's all right, isn't it?
Reading the bylaw.
We read them a lot.
That was the debate you were watching.
Yeah, that was the debate, I'm sorry, yeah. Thank you for accommodating those questions.
Steve?
I just want to state, and again...
Okay, state your name and address, please.
Steve Bjork from 38 Lads Way. The finding is actually to determine if they've increased the non-conforming nature. If they have increased the non-conforming nature, then it reaches the point where it's a special permit, and they have to determine if that special permit creates a situation where it's substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. If there's no increase in the non-conforming nature, it can't be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. So it's basically a two-pronged test.
I'm not sure I agree that I think
That's one situation.
Section 6 requires us to make findings about what you're talking about, whether there's an increase or an intensification of it, but I think and again, I'm delving back into this again, and it has many layers, as you know. So where do you see that if we determine that there is an increase in a pre-existing nonconformity or an intensification, that converts it to a special permit, as opposed to just making a finding that that's what it does and is doing, and then you get a permit as opposed to a special permit to build?
Most of the court cases I've read over 30 years. That's what kicks it into the special.
I was reading them today, some of yours. Yeah.
I think my recollection is, and it may be a distinction without a difference, but the findings, we will frequently make findings. We will reach the conclusion that the project should be able to go forward within the confines of the bylaw without having to go to the special permit component. On other situations where we will find that we will make findings which then will trigger a special permit. It isn't, I don't think it's a necessary move to the special permit. It frequently does go to the special permit because there's a reduction in, an intensification of a nonconformity, and therefore, with the Gale, it changes some of those past practices, but I think we're pretty consistent and try to stay up on the new law so that we don't run afoul of the courts, even
I'm
when
just glad we're
appealed.
not doing the maintain a corner board routine anymore. Well, that's, you know, that's where section 6 came from, yeah.
Right.
Good.
Do you want to explain that to the public, the viewing public, or do you want me to?
Years ago, you couldn't, there was no such thing as not more non-conforming. You were either conforming or non-conforming.
Right.
And if you rebuilt a structure, you had to maintain a reasonable amount of that structure in order to qualify.
Right.
And that drove everybody crazy.
You've got into situations where you could have
I
a...
turned down 2 offers of appointment to your board over that.
But you could get into situations where a building could be completely decimated by animal,
Yeah.
infestation, termites, and you have to keep part of that structure, and now you're just keeping something that's not structural, and then later it gets replaced anyway. But you're right, it was a workaround. It wasn't an honest way to deal with it.
It's like, remember the political signs with the wheels?
Yes, we're not supposed, are we allowed to have political signs now? That aren't on wheels? Wait a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
No?
Move to adjourn?
Any other business? No? Motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
All in favor?
All right.